Okay, so for this next video lecture, so we are still in module number 1 for our second topic, organizational structure and AIS. Okay, of course, you already know what is an organizational structure. Okay, so this is the how the command, okay, will be taken place in an organization, okay, from top management down to their subordinates or employees. Okay, so the structure of the organization, this will help to allocate responsibility as well, authority and accountability. Okay, so segmenting by business function is very common method, okay, in an organization, or depending on how they present, okay, their organizational structure as well. For here, we have the functional segmentation of the entity. So they can have materials management, purchasing, receiving and stores, production planning, quality control and maintenance, marketing, distribution, personnel, finance, accounting, and IT. Okay, these are just some of the examples, but again, depending on the nature of the entity and how they classify their activity or business activity, okay, they can add to it as well. Here, if you could notice, under the functional segmentation, accounting is independent, or it was created in a separate segment. So here, information reliability, of course, in accounting, this requires independence, and we all know that, okay, because here it should be free from influences, okay, that will create a misstatement in the financial statements. Okay, meaning override from the management if they would want to achieve something, or if they have their interest or objectives. So the management can actually influence on how financial report will come out and presented. But in this case, it should be independent and free from that influence. Okay, so that the financial reports will reflect what is the true status of the entity. Okay, so accounting activities must be separate, and it should be independent also of the functional areas, in, for example, in maintaining the resources. Okay, so here there should be a separate function and personnel, okay, that should be working on these segments to avoid influence and override of information. So accounting supports these functions with information but does not actively participate, okay, for example, in the maintaining resources. So here, the objective or the function of accounting is just to record the transactions that takes place in that segment, but they do not actually participate actively in their activities. Okay, so decision makers in this function requires that such vital information should be supplied by independent source. Okay, that is, of course, to make sure its integrity. Okay, that's why in other firms, they have this sourcing of accounting services, okay, or they have their internal auditing or internal audit department to make sure that everything within the organization takes place according to its function and objectives, to avoid errors and misstatement or fraud. And at the same time, when reporting to external regulatory agencies, okay, the financial statements in certain or of certain entity should be audited as well, to make sure that their financial statement is free from material misstatement. Okay, so that's why in every organization, accounting should be a separate department with independence, okay, to make sure that reports and financial data generated has integrity or is reliable. Okay, so we have here the data processing. Okay, so basically most companies fall in between the distributed data processing and centralized data processing. So this is the two types, okay, of data processing that an entity can employ, okay, in their organization. For the distributed data, this is the reorganizing of computer services function into small information processing units, and this is distributed to the end users and placed under their control, meaning it has a separate computer service for each department that they use. Okay, this is distributed data and they can control on how to use it or what information to store. But again, there is control, okay, still that should be placed in the hands of the management, of course, to maintain integrity. Okay, or in this case, they can also create internal controls, okay, to avoid errors and misstatement or fraud. What about centralized data processing? So under this data processing, all data is processed or performed in one or more large computers, okay, at a central site. This serves users throughout the organization. So under the centralized data processing, there is only one or large computer that is used for all the transactions of the entity. So unlike the distributed data, each segment or division have their own computer. But in centralized, we only have one computer. So the primary areas under the centralized data processing there is database administration, data processing, system development, and maintenance. Although these areas can also be seen in a distributed data processing, but it's limited only. Okay, unlike under the centralized data processing. So because in this case, under the centralized data processing, a lot of different items of transactions that varies in nature and amount are being processed in one computer. So that's why control and maintenance should be placed. Okay. So this is an example of distributed data processing model. Okay, so if you could see, there are, in this illustration, we have 4 computer users. So they have their own transactions, they have their local user database, okay, to store their information. Okay, each of them has their separate local user database and computer to process their transactions. Okay, so but in a centralized data processing, we can only have one user and one database for all of the transactions from the different segments. Okay, these are our data processing model. So in this case, for the organizational structure in AIS, it is very important here to note that your accounting department should be independent from other departments so that they will be able to perform their functions effectively and efficiently. Okay, and also, depending on the need of the organization or the nature or what they can afford, so they can apply either distributed processing or centralized data processing, okay, in their information system. Okay, so that's for the organizational structure and AIS.